All right, so let's dive into this whole Donald Trump prominent women thing with the election coming up.
Yeah.
We got a bunch of articles and some pretty heated social media posts to look at.
Right. And it's a really interesting time to be looking at all of this.
Definitely.
Um,
So it's not just about the headlines themselves, right? But what they tell us about like power dynamics and how they're playing out on the campaign trail.
exactly. It's like a public chess match almost.
Right.
Every move has these huge ripples through the electorate.
Yeah. And especially in such a close race like this one.
Absolutely.
It's
Every little thing matters.
yeah, every little thing matters.
And we're going to unpack all of that.
Yeah, so right away we had Mark Cuban on The View, and he made a pretty bold statement saying that Trump just doesn't like to be challenged by strong, intelligent women.
Yeah, he even used the word intimidating.
He did.
You could practically see the hosts trying to figure out what to say.
Oh, yeah, the looks on their faces.
It was perfect.
And then the internet just blew up.
Oh, of course.
Right.
Cuban walked it back later. On X, even apologized.
He did.
And, he pointed out that he knows a lot of strong, intelligent women who support Trump, even some in his own family.
That's an interesting point.
But does that apology really get at the heart of the matter?
Right.
Was it genuine, or was it just damage control?
Yeah, I mean, even if he didn't mean to stir the pot, like that, his words really tapped into a perception that's already out there.
Oh, and absolutely.
And that perception, whether it's true or not, is what we're really going to try to understand.
Yeah, and it's not just perception.
Right.
I mean, the way Trump responded, it's really telling, too.
Oh, yeah. How so?
Well, instead of, engaging with what Cuban was actually saying, he went straight to name-calling, called him a really dumb guy.
He did.
And then he doubled down, saying that he surrounds himself with the strongest women in the world.
Right. He brought up those examples like female heads of state.
Exactly.
But is that really a show of strength? Or is it kind of proving Cuban's point without meaning to?
That's the question, isn't it?
Yeah, it feels like there's something deeper going on here.
It's like a power struggle playing out on a national stage.
Totally. And it's not just a one-off thing either.
No, not at all.
This article talks about a whole pattern of behavior.
Right, going way back.
Like with Hillary Clinton,
Nancy Pelosi.
Kamala Harris.
It's like a recurring theme.
This strong language, the personal attacks, it's...
Exactly, and it's not just locker room talk or Twitter feuds.
No, this is different.
This dynamic, this perception of how he interacts with women who challenge him, it feeds directly into a major issue in this election, the gender gap.
And that's where things get really interesting and where we start to see how all of this could actually impact the election itself.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we're seeing those reports about Kamala Harris getting lots of support from women, particularly in those swing states.
Right, the ones that could really decide things.
Exactly.
And it gets even trickier here.
Oh, how so?
Nikki Haley endorsed Trump,
She did.
but she's also been critical of his campaign's rhetoric towards women.
Yeah, that's a tough position to be in.
It's like walking a tightrope.
Trying to balance those two things. Her political alliance and her personal stance on how women should be treated.
It really makes you think.
It does. What do you make of it?
I mean, is it a calculated move by the Republicans? Are they trying to soften their image to attract more women voters?
Interesting. Or is it a sign of real change within the party?
Maybe.
Well, the article points out that Trump and Harris have very different messages.
Right.
Trump said he wants to protect women, whether they like it or not.
And Harris is all about building trust and respecting women's decisions.
So two very different approaches.
Absolutely. And that leads us to a really important point.
Okay, what's that?
Trump said many times that his administration would be great for women and for their reproductive rights.
Right.
But how does that line up with how a lot of people see his stance on abortion, especially after he appointed those 3 Supreme Court justices who helped overturn Roe v. Wade?
Yeah, that's a big issue for a lot of women voters.
Yeah.
So there seems to be this disconnect between what he says and what he does on issues that really affect women's lives.
Right. And that disconnect that's playing out everywhere in the media, on social media.
And probably in voters' minds, too.
For sure. It's not just about what the candidates believe or what they've done.
It's about how voters see those things.
Exactly. And that perception can be just as powerful as the reality, especially in an election this close.
So we've been talking about the gender gap in terms of voting.
Right.
But there's also a gap in how men and women see these candidates.
How they understand these claims and responses.
And how all of that will affect their vote in the end.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
It is. How do men and women interpret all of this?
And how will that shape the election?
Big questions. It feels like we've been through a lot.
We have.
Started with Cuban's take on Trump and strong women, and now we're talking about a gender gap that could decide the whole election.
It all comes back to perception. You know,
Okay.
in this media world we live in, those sound bites and headlines, they really matter,
Yeah, more than the actual reality sometimes.
especially in a close race.
Right. How voters see the candidates and how they feel about their views on women could really determine the outcome.
Absolutely. And it's not just about what's being said,
It's about how it lands with people.
exactly how it fits into what they already believe or challenges those beliefs.
We're talking about the power of perception to shape reality.
Precisely. And that's something we should all think about, not just during elections,
About all the time.
right? In how we interact with information and form our own opinions.
So what stands out to you the most from all of this?
What should our listeners really take away?
Yeah.
I think the big takeaway is that it's not about whether Cuban was right or if Trump's response was good.
Okay.
It's about how those exchanges are perceived, the stories they tell.
And how those perceptions could be the deciding factor in a tight race.
Exactly.
That makes you think about how all of this will actually affect voters as we get closer to the election.
It does.
What does it tell us about gender in politics today?
It's something to think about as we head to the polls.
Definitely. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.
It's been fascinating.
Really eye-opening to see how all these things connect perceptions, gender dynamics, political strategies.
Absolutely.
We'll be back next time with another topic you want to understand better.
Until then, keep asking those questions.
Stay curious out there.